Hey guys, welcome to Tabletop Sydney. Today we are talking about the top 3 warbands from the Direchasm season. I'm going to go into a bit of detail into that a little bit later. But first I want to touch on a few topics that are important. Some housekeeping before we get to the nice dessert at the end. The housekeeping for today is sort of 2 things. One, we are getting out of lockdown soon. Monday, the 11th, I think the date is, we are getting out and we can meet up again. Obviously, there are some restrictions in place, obviously. We want to make sure that, we aren't causing, tons of cases and thus deaths, which is obviously catastrophic. So we've organised a ton to meet up, and so hopefully in the next few weeks, we should have some games with the whole crew again. So I'm looking forward to that, looking forward to seeing them. It's been 3.5 months, something like that, where I haven't seen them, so it's kind of sad, but that's fine, we persevere and then we'll come out all the stronger for it. The second thing I want to talk about is the new season of Warhammer Underworlds, Harrow Deep, which I'm never going to remember the name of, ever. That's okay. There've been a lot of information released for it, a few things that are unusual, and a few things that the community and other content creators have been, I would say, very critical of. And I kind of wanted to produce a bit more of a counterpoint to that because I actually think a lot of these changes are really healthy for the game. There are some new mechanics for the game, and every season we've had of Underworld so far, there's been new mechanics. Season 2 we had Wizards join, that's huge. Season 4 with Beastgrave, we had tons of changes. We had a lot of keywords being added just to consolidate rules down, like scything. We had Hunter Quarry added, lots of different rules. And no, this is no exception to this season. I think people are overreacting in regards to what the rules are. We haven't played it yet. Give it a chance. It might make it interesting and different, and that's fine. It'll still be the fun game where you roll dice and try and kill people, just with some twists. The other point people have been sort of hitting on is with the, I'll say, call it Rivals format. I actually am the most excited for this format ever. I don't know if the format will be interesting or not. I plan on finding out. But what makes me really excited about this format is it is catered at new players. And what that means is that Games Workshop are focusing on bringing new people into the game, which is absolutely hugely important for 2 reasons. One, to keep the game going. If you don't have new players coming in, then the game dies because every so often you have a player churn out, which is, stop playing the game. You need someone to replace him. And if you have one player leave and no one replace him, eventually your game dies. So we do need new players. Vanguard format was not a solution for new players because you still have to buy every warband in a season. With this, a new player can come in, buy a box and play tons of games with just one little itsy-bitsy purchase to start them off. They haven't got to invest in anything. They're not getting out-skilled by people that just buy every card. I know most people are complaining of people that generally have every card and generally have the advantages of having better decks than everyone. This format is what is going to turn Underworlds into a future game many seasons down the track. It won't last if we don't have these new player formats. So not only do I encourage you to give it a try, I encourage you to, when you play new players, play that format. Play against them using that and encourage them to keep playing because it is important to the future of the game. Is it the best format ever? We'll find out. But they're thinking that way, which is good because it means they're invested in the long-term success of the game, which is encouraging for all of us because we love the game, we don't want to die. Anyway, let's start off. Let's jump into the main part of the video, which is going to be the top 3 warbands from Direchasm. Let's go. Now it will be really simple and kind of short if I made a list of the best warbands in Direchasm season without at least breaking it down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it into the 3 archetypes of Underworld's warbands there are. Aggro, Hold Objective, and Flex. Now what does this mean actually? A lot of people sort of go, what puts a warband in these categories? I mean, what is Aggro and what is Hold Objective? And what is Flex for that matter? Well, Aggro warbands and Objective warbands can be sorted out in one of 2 ways. When you put 2 warbands down and they play each other, if both players play a non-interactive gameplay, they just sit back and score their objectives without getting any kills, generally you have one player that is just going to win. So the onus is on the other player to be aggressive there, to try and kill fighters, to deny objectives, and preferably do both. So in that scenario, the player that is attacking, the player that is forced to attack, is an aggro warband. If you were to play, let's say, a matchup of Thorns of the Briar Queen versus Grimwatch, well, they're both Hold Objective warbands, but one of them has to play aggro based on what deck they are. Now, I call aggro warbands that in most of their games, the way their decks are built, how they score their cards, they're aggressive more often than not. Hold Objective warbands are generally warbands that will sit back and play passive and they'll score objectives. They might be holding actual objectives, but in reality, they're just scoring a lot of glory by not having to interact with the opponent. The Flex, the guys in the middle, are warbands that can do both. They're warbands that can sit back and do nothing against aggro warbands and win, And then they're warbands that are capable about going forward and taking out opponents' warbands as well. And they're generally in their games going to 50% of the time or so do that. So there's the three categories. I split warbands out into those three, and we're going to give you my list now. And I'm going to start with aggro. So with aggro, our top three, our number 3 spot is going to go to Ripper's Snarlfangs. I think Rippers are a great warband. They have good fighters, good stats in their cards. But what really takes them into their own is their faction cards. They have fantastic faction cards. They score glory like crazy. If you are looking at a lot of Ripper decks, they have a good 6 to 8 of their own faction cards in there, which is generally unheard of. They're very consistent. They can spike damage quite high with their dog bite, which is unreliable, but it does make opponents scared. If you've got 2 wound fighters, suddenly they can come charging in and take 2 of them out and attack. That is very scary, and that makes them very, very strong and one of the best aggro warbands in the game, but not the best. Number 2 is Morgoth's Crushers. Yes, they were the best, but they've sort of been knocked down a few rungs with the latest far restricted update list. Some of their really good cards got restricted, so they're not able to take as many good cards, but in the end, they have some of the best stats on cards that you can get. 5 wounds is difficult to kill. It's even more difficult to get primacy against them. Let's say you have a lot of cards that you get from primacy. Well, you can kill the leader, that's one. But if you're doing 5 damage in one hit, that's pretty unlikely, especially early on in the game. So I think they're very good, especially in the current meta of aggro, of the meta in Direchasm. If you played them during the Direchasm season, you would have, if you played them well, had some great success with them. They were very good, but they aren't the best due to the recent changes. The best goes to Eltharion's Soul Raid. They're one of the newest warbands, and they're probably the least tested. You haven't seen them as much, at least on our channel, and a lot of other creators haven't really played many games with them either. But if you've been playing online or been playing against some very good players with them, they are the bee's knees. They have every trick in the book. You think Rippers are scary? They can go further. You think Rippers have good faction cards? They've got pretty good faction cards too. They have that free support with the fish. The fish has a lot of cool ways to interact with poison ploys, but you don't even need the poison ploys. You can do other things as well. They score a lot of great glory just by moving, and being inspired in round 2, which is generally around where most of the stuff happens, is really good. They are, from our perspective, the best aggro warband in the current meta right now of Direchasm. Next, we're going to move on to hold objective warbands. These warbands generally sit back and score a lot of glory, and if you don't attack them or fight into them, generally you'll lose the game because their ceiling will be around 20, 24, and you'll be scoring 10 to 15. So they force you to come to them, and when you have to charge in, you're not in the ideal spot, of course. So number 3 on this list is going to be the old Kings of Hold objective, the Grimwatch. Yes, they have bumped down a few spots. They haven't really been hit by the restricted list or anything, but they've just kind of been a bit of a poor, I don't know, victim of the meta. They haven't really liked the primacy rule too much. They do feed a lot of glory that way, but they haven't got much counterpunch either. They do a lot of damage, but it's unreliable damage. They're rolling 2 daggers to do 3 damage on one of their fighters, for example. I think that they're very good. They have a lot of cool tricks there. They can play hard and fast, but their counterpunch isn't quite there, and that's why they sort of sit down at number 3 on the list. Coming in at number 2 on our list is Pre's favourite, the Starblood Stalkers. They are one of the best whole objective warbands right now, and they're one of the best, despite being down a fighter on a lot of the warbands, because they have so much flexibility. They haven't got just a basic stat line that every fighter has. They all have their own little tricks and tools to make the game happen. Clacktrop, for example, is a great fighter. So if you're playing aggressive, going into them, suddenly you've got this big dinosaur in front of you that can one-shot you very easily. That's scary, so you've got to be very careful with how you play against them. They're also very fast, so they can sort of spread out the board and make it impossible for you to attack them. They have a lot of cool tricks. Lord of Space and Time, for example, fantastic card, and their objectives are good as well. They have good reactions. They're a fantastic warband. Despite being only 6, they are on our list as number 2 for hold objective warbands right now. But they are not number 1. The kings of holding objectives in the current meta has got to be Thorns of the Briar Queen. They are an older warband, but they pull off a lot of damage. They are very scary to play against. You can push all your guys onto objectives very quickly, and if you go into their territory, you don't have to just worry about one fighter in Clacktrop. You've got to worry about the Queen, you've got to worry about Varklav, Everhanged. Those 3 all do a lot of damage. You give Varklav +1 damage and he'll kill most fighters. They inspire pretty reliably. You can also inspire key fighters at certain points. And the Chain Rasp is useful as well. They have great faction cards. Sudden Appearance, for example, is fantastic. They can de-inspire a key fighter when he misses an attack. fantastic cards. They are definitely the best. They've seen a resurgence in Direchasm, especially towards the middle and towards the late part of Direchasm. But if you're looking for a whole objective warband to play and you have them, give them a try. They're definitely the best right now. We'll see what happens when Direchasm ends and we go into the next season, of course. And moving on to the final category, it is the Flex Warbands. And this warband category is a bit all over the place because warbands in this category, based on the meta, can shift into hold objective or aggro at a moment's notice. So this is the hardest one to rate for sure. We're going to start out with number 3, and they are Lady Harrow's Mournflight. They are a very good warband. They haven't seen as much play recently, but they have very good cards. They can score a good amount of objectives without having to interact with an opponent. And they have decent attacks as well. If they need to go aggro, they can do it. They get double dodge for defense, which is fantastic. You can interact with things like Buried Instinct well. They don't take damage from lethals. There's lots of really cool tricks to them, and they're very solid. And you can generally, with your speed and your cards, outplay a lot of opponents. They do struggle in a few matchups though, and a few bad dice rolls early. If you lose a few ghosts, it could be a rough one to win. But they're still very good, and they are number 3 on our list. Moving on to number 2 for Flex, it is going to be the Dread Pageant. This is a bit of a weird one. They sometimes sit in the aggro side of tier lists, but I think in the current meta, they generally are playing reactive. They're looking at what their opponent does and trying to disrupt. They have a lot of really good scoring objectives. They inspire in a kind of a difficult way. Sometimes you're not really playing for the inspire, you more notice it. But they have a lot of really cool tools. They have 4 very unique and different fighters. And you can play them in a lot of very different ways. I think they're a great example of a Flex Warband. They have a great counterpunch, but you can't always play them aggro. If you run up against something like Morlocks, you kind of need to play a little bit cagey, play back. And they can do that. They've got good range and they have good abilities. If you're looking for a good Flex Warband to try, I would recommend them right now in the current meta. If the meta shifts more towards hold objective, they kind of become an aggro warband per sense. But I think that they are very good right now, and I would definitely give them a try if you're looking for a good warband. And finally, the number 1 Flex Warband. This might be a bit contentious because I think they're Flex. I'm going to call it's Kanan's Reapers. They are a warband that everyone looks at and think of them as aggro, but the way you can play them, you can play a very passive style with them. If you're playing against an aggressive warband, you're generally sitting back waiting for them to come punching in, and they have some of the best counterpunch in the game. When you get that many supports that easily, you're getting reliable hits. You're rolling sometimes 5 sides of your dice being successes and 1 side not being. Kanan as well is a great fighter. He sort of sits in the middle and makes them kind of question where they want to go. You can't one-shot him. You come into the territory and you're trying to avoid this big 2-range bubble around him to try and kill the Mortek, and sometimes it's not possible. And sometimes a sidestep just ruins your plans. I think they're one of the best. I think they have some really good faction cards for scoring objectives. Some pretty easy surges and end phase cards. They have some really fantastic upgrades. They definitely have the best, I think, best faction upgrades in the game. Unnerving Synchrony is great. That one just sells it for itself. There's a lot of other good ones as well, like Empowered Nadirite. But for me, I think, and as far as a Flex Warband goes, I think they're definitely number 1 on the list currently. Obviously, they do have some downsides. Poor dice rolls, for example. They only have 2 wound fighters. Scything attacks really hurt for them too if you can get some extra dice or ways to get past the defense. And if they fail to inspire by late round 2, they can get picked apart a bit. But I still think as far as Flex Warbands go, they can be played both ways. I think they're amazing as well, so give them a try. Anyway, that's our top 3 for the Direchasm season. Obviously not limited to just Direchasm Warbands, but the meta currently. That's what we're looking at. I would love to hear what you guys think. Let us know what you think deserves to be in there. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Are you sort of just here trying to learn? I'd love to know more about what you're trying to play. If you have any questions, obviously let us know, but I'd love to see what you guys think. Which warbands did we forget? Which warband deserves at the top? Did we sort of fall over and go, oh yeah, that warband should have been there, but we completely forgot about it? Let us know. We'd love to discuss it. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. We'll be back soon with another video. Have a good week.